The New One by Fredric Brown.
Papa, are human beings real?
Drat it, kid, don't they teach you those things at Ashtaroth's class? If they don't, then what am I paying them 10 BTU a semester for?
Ashtaroth talks about it, Papa, but I can't make much sense out of what he says.
Ashtaroth is a bit, what does he say?
He says they are, and we aren't. That we exist only because they believe in us. That we are something.
Figments of their imagination?
That's it, Papa. We're figments of their imagination, he says.
Well, what's hard about that? Doesn't it answer your question?
But, Papa, if we're not real, why are we here? I mean, how can...
All right, kid. I suppose I might as well take time out to explain this to you. But first, don't let these things worry you. They're academic.
What's academic?
Something that doesn't really matter. Something you got to learn so you won't be ignorant, like a dumb dryad. The real lessons, the ones you should study hard, are the ones you get in Lobolamy's class and Marduk's.
You mean red magic and possession and...
Yeah, that sort of thing. Particularly the red magic. That's your field as a fire elemental, see? But to get back to this reality stuff, there are two kinds of stuff. Mind and matter. You got that much clear now.
Yes, Papa.
Well, mind is higher than matter, isn't it? A higher plane of existence. Now things like rocks and... Like rocks are pure matter. That's the lowest kind of existence. Human beings are a kind of fork between mind and matter. They got both. Their bodies are matter, like rocks, and yet they got minds that run them. That makes them halfway up the scale. Understand?
I guess so, Papa, but...
Don't interrupt. Then the third and highest form of existence is, us. The elementals and the gods and the myths of all kinds, the banshees and the mermaids and the ifrits and the loups-garous and, everybody and everything you see around here, or higher.
But if we aren't real, how...
Hush! We're higher because we're pure thought, see? We're pure mind stock, kid. Just like humans evolved out of non-thinking matter, we evolved out of them. They conceived us. Now do you understand?
I guess so, Papa, but what if they quit believing in us?
They never will, completely. There'll always be some of them who believe, and that's enough. Of course, the more of them believe in us, the stronger we are individually. Now, you take some of the older lads, like Amun-ra and Marduk. They're kind of weak and puny these days because they haven't any real followers. They used to be big guns around here, kid. I remember when Marduk could lick his weight in harpies. Look at him today. Walks with a cane. And Thor. Boy, you should have heard him in a ruckus only a few centuries ago.
But what, Papa, if it ever gets so nobody up there believes in them, do they die?
Theoretically, yes. But there's one thing saves us. There are some humans who believe anything. Or anyway, don't actually disbelieve in anything. That group is a sort of nucleus that holds things together. No matter how discredited a belief is, they hang on by doubting a little.
But what, Papa, if they conceive of a new mythological being? Would he come into existence down here?
Of course, kid. That's how we all got here, one time or another. Why, look at poltergeists, for instance. They're newcomers, and all of this ectoplasm you see floating around and getting in the way, that's new. And, like this big guy, Paul Bunyan. He's only been around here a century or so. He isn't much older than you are, and lots of others. Of course, they have got to get invoked before they show up. But that always gets done sooner or later.
Gosh, thanks, Papa. I understand you a lot better than I did Ashtaroth. He uses big words like transmorgification and super-actualization and whatnot.
Okay, kid, now run along and play. But don't bring any of those darn water elemental kids back with you. The place gets so full of steam I can't see, and a very important personage is going to drop in.
Who, Papa?
Darveth, the head fire demon, the big shot himself. That's why I want you to run along outside.
Gee, Papa, can't I?
No, he wants to talk to me about something important. He's got a human being on the string, and it's ticklish business.
How do you mean, got a human being on the string? What's he want to do with him?
Make him set fires, of course, up there. What Darveth's going to do with this guy will be good. He says better than what he did with Nero or Mrs. O'Leary's cow. It's something big on this time.
Gee, can't I watch?
Later, maybe. There's nothing to watch yet. This guy's still just a baby. But Darveth's far-sighted. Get him young, that's his idea. It'll take years to work out, but it'll be hot stuff when it happens.
Can I watch then?
Sure, kid, but run along and play now, and keep away from those frost giants.
Yes, Papa.
It took 22 years for it to get him. He fought it off that long, and then Bluey. Oh, it had been there all along, ever since Wally Smith was a baby. Ever since, well, it was there before he could remember. Since he'd managed to stand on babyhood's thick, stubby little legs, hanging on 2 bars on his playpen, and had watched his father take a little stick and rub it across the sole of his shoe, and then hold it to his pipe. Funny thing, those clouds of smoke that came from that pipe. They were there, and then they weren't, like gray phantoms. But that was merely interesting in a mild way. What drew his eyes, his round, wide, wondering eyes, was the flame. The thing that danced on the end of the stick. The thing that flared there, ever shape-changing. Yellow, red, blue wonder. Magic beauty. One of his chubby hands clung to the bar of the playpen, and the other reached out for the flame. His. He wanted it. His. And his father, holding it safely out of reach, grinning at him in proud and blind paternity, never guessing. Pretty, huh, sonny? But mustn't touch. Fire burn. Yes, Wally, fire burns. Wally Smith knew a lot about fire by the time he was in school. He knew that fire burns. He knew it by experience, and it had been painful but not bitter experience. The scar was on his forearm to remind him, the blotchy white scar that would always be there when he rolled up his sleeves. It had marked him in another way, too, his eyes. That had come early also. The sun, the glorious sun, the murderous sun. He'd watched that, too, when his mother had moved his playpen out into the yard, watched it with breathless fascination until his eyes hurt, and had looked back at it again as soon as he could, and had stretched up his little arms toward it. He knew that it was fire, flame, somehow identical with the thing that danced on the end of the sticks his father held to his pipe. Fire. He loved it. And so, quite young, he wore glasses. All his life he was to be nearsighted and wear thickish glasses. The draft board took one look at the thickness of those lenses and didn't even send him around for a physical examination. On the thickness of his lenses, they marked him exempt and told him to go home. That was tough, because he wanted to get in. He'd seen a movie newsreel that showed the new flamethrowers. If he could get one of those things to operate. But that desire was subconscious. He didn't know that it was a big part of the reason he wanted to get into uniform. That was in the fall of 41, and we weren't in the war yet. Later, after December, it was still part of the reason he wanted to get in, but not the major part. Wally Smith was a good American. That was even more important than being a good pyromaniac. Anyway, he licked the pyromania, or thought he had. If it was there, it was buried deep down where most of the time he could avoid thinking about it, and there was a "thus far, no farther" sign across the passage of his mind. That yen for a flamethrower worried him a bit. Then came Pearl Harbor, and Wally Smith had it out with himself to discover whether it was all patriotism that made him want to kill Japs, or whether that yen for a flamethrower figured at all. And while he mulled it over, things got hotter in the Philippines, and the Japs moved down Malaya to Singapore, and there were U-boats off the coast, and it began to look as though his country needed him. And there was a fighting anger in him that told him the hell with whether or not it was pyromania, it was patriotism even more, and he'd worry about the psychiatry of it later. He tried 3 recruiting stations, and each of them bounced him back. Then the factory where he worked changed over, and... But wait, we're getting a bit ahead of things. When little Wally Smith was 7, they took him to a psychiatrist. Yes, said the psychiatrist, pyromania, or anyway, a strong tendency toward pyromania. And, what causes it, doctor? You've seen that psychiatrist lots of times, in Yeast ads, identified, probably correctly, as the famous Vienna specialist. Remember when there was that long line of famous Vienna specialists who advocated eating yeast for everything from moral turpitude to ingrowing toenails? That, of course, was before the Nazi steamroller crushed Austria and blood began to flow like wine. Well, make a composite picture in your mind of the Vienna yeast dynasty, and you'll know how impressive that psychiatrist looked. And, what causes it, doctor?
Emotional instability, Mr. Smith. Pyromania is not insanity, I wish you to understand. Not as long as it remains, under control. It is a compulsive neurosis, predicated upon emotional instability. As to why the neurosis took that particular channel of expression, somewhere back in infancy there must have been a psychic trauma which...
A what, doctor?
A trauma, a wound to the psyche, the mind. Possibly, in the case of pyromania, the suffering caused by a severe burn. You've heard the old saying, Mr. Smith, a burned child fears the fire.
And the psychiatrist smiled condescendingly and waved his wand. I mean his pince-nez glasses on the black silk ribbon, in a gesture of exorcism. The truth is quite the converse, of course. The burned child loves the fire. Was young Wally ever burned, Mr. Smith? Why, yes, doctor. When he was 4, he got a hold of some matches, and... There's the scar in plain sight on his arm, Doc. Didn't you notice it? And surely a burned child loves the fire, else he probably wouldn't have been burned in the first place. The psychiatrist failed to ask about pre-fire symptoms, but then he would merely have deprecated them had Mr. Smith remembered to tell him. He'd have assured you that such attraction toward flame is normal and that it didn't achieve abnormal proportions until after the episode of the burn. Once a psychiatrist is in full war paint on the traumata trail, he can explain such minor discrepancies without half trying. And so the psychiatrist, having found the cause, cured him. Period. Now, Darvith.
No, I'm going to wait.
But it'd be fun to see that schoolhouse burn down. It'd burn easily, too, and the fire escapes aren't quite big enough.
Uh-huh. But just the same, I'm going to wait.
You mean he'll get a whack at something bigger later on?
That's the idea.
But are you sure he won't wiggle off your hook?
Not him. Time to get up, Wally. All right, Mama.
He sat up in bed, hair rumpled, and reached for his glasses so he could see her. And then,
Mama, I had one of those dreams again last night. The thing that was all fire, and another one like it, but different and not so big, talking to it. About the schoolhouse, and... Wally, the doctor told you mustn't talk about those dreams, except when he asks you. You see, talking about them impresses them on your mind, and you remember them and think about it, and then it makes you dream about them again. See, Wally boy? Yes, but why can't I tell you? Because the doctor said not to, Wally. Now, tell me what you did in school yesterday. Did you get 100 in arithmetic again?
Of course, the psychiatrist took keen interest in those dreams. They were part of his stock in trade, but he found them confused, meaningless stuff, and you can't blame him for that, Have you ever listened to a 7-year-old kid try to tell the plot of a movie he's seen? It was hash, the way Wally remembered and told it.
And then this big yellow thing it didn't do much then, I guess. And then the big one, the one that was taller than the other and redder, was talking to it something about fishing and saying he wouldn't wiggle off the hook and...
Sitting there on the edge of the chair, looking at the psychiatrist through his thick-lensed glasses, his hands twisting tightly together and his eyes round and wide, but talking gibberish.
My little man, when you sleep tonight, try to think about something pleasant, something you like much, like a bonfire, Doctor. No, I mean something like playing baseball or going skating.
They watched him carefully. Particularly, they kept matches away from him and fire. His parents bought an electric stove instead of their gas one, although they couldn't really afford it. But then again, because of the danger of matches, his father gave up smoking, and what he saved on tobacco paid for the stove. Yes, he was cured all right. The psychiatrist took credit for that, as well as cash. At any rate, the more dangerous outward symptoms disappeared. He was still fascinated by fire, but what boy doesn't chase fire engines? He grew up to be a fairly husky young man, tall, if a bit awkward, about the right build for a basketball player, except that his eyes weren't good enough to let him play. He didn't smoke, and after an experience or two, he decided that he didn't drink either. Drinking tended to weaken that barrier that said, "Thus far, no farther," across the blocked passage of his mind. That night, he'd almost let go and set fire to the factory where he worked days as a shipping clerk. Almost, but not quite. "Now, Darvith."
Not yet.
"But, Master, why wait longer? That's a big building, it's wood, and it's ramshackle, and they make celluloid novelties. And celluloid! You've seen celluloid burn, haven't you, Darvith?"
Yes, it is beautiful, but...
"You think there's a bigger chance coming?"
Think! I know there is.
Wally Smith woke up with an awful hangover that next morning, and found there was a box of matches in his pocket. They hadn't been there when he started to drink the night before, and he didn't remember when or where he'd picked them up. But it gave him the willies to think that he had picked them up, and it gave him the screaming memes to wonder what he'd had in his mind when he'd put that box of matches in his pocket. He knew that he'd been on the ragged edge of something, and he had had a very frightening idea of what that something had been. Anyway, he took the pledge. He made up his mind that he'd never, under any circumstances, drink again. He thought he could be sure of himself as long as he didn't drink. As long as his conscious mind was in control, he wasn't a pyromaniac. Damn it, he wasn't! The psychiatrist had cured him of that when he was a kid, hadn't he? Sure he had. But just the same, there came to be a haunted look in his eyes. Luckily, it didn't show much through his thick glasses. Dot noticed it a little. Dot Wendler, the girl he went with. And although Dot didn't know it, that night put another tragedy into his life. For Wally had been on the verge of proposing to her, but now... Was it fair, he wondered, for him to ask a girl like Dot to marry him when he was no longer quite sure? He almost decided to give her up and not torture himself by seeing her again. That was a bit too much, though. He compromised by continuing to date her, but not popping the question. A bit like a man who dares not eat, but who stares into delicatessen windows every chance he gets. Then it got to be December 7th in the year of 1941, and it was on the morning of the 9th that he tried to enlist in 3 recruiting stations and was turned down in each. Dot tried to console him, although down in her heart she was glad.
But, Wally, I'm sure the factory you work for will switch over to defense work. All the ones like it are changing, and you'll be just as helpful. The country needs guns and ammunition and stuff just as much as it needs soldiers. And...
She wanted to say, and it would give him a chance to settle down and marry her, but of course she didn't say it. It was early in January that she was proved right. He was laid off during an interim period while the factory changed over. There was 2 weeks of that. The first week, a happy vacation, because Dot took a week off work too, and they went everywhere together. She took the week off without pay, just to be with him, but she didn't tell him that. Then, at the end of 2 weeks, he was called back to work. They'd made the changeover rather quickly. It doesn't require as much changing and retooling for a factory working with chemicals as for one working in metals. They were going to nitrate toluene, and when toluene has been so treated, they call it trinitrotoluene when they have the time. When they haven't the time for a mouthful of syllables like that, TNT describes it just as well. Now, Darvith.
Now!
By noon that day, Wally Smith didn't know what was wrong with him, but he knew he didn't feel so well. Mentally, something was wrong with him, and getting wronger. He went out onto the loading platform against the railroad spur to eat his lunch. There were a dozen cars on the spur, and 10 men were working through the lunch hour at unloading one of them. Stuff in sacks that looked heavy.
What is it?
Wally called over to one of the men. Just cement for the fireproofing.
Oh, said Wally. When do they start on that?
The man put down his sack and ran the back of a dirty hand across his forehead. Tomorrow. Know how they're handling this job, he grinned. Tear down one wall at a time and pour a cement one, right while they keep on running full blast.
Said Wally. All those cars full of cement?
Nah, just this one. Those others are chemicals and stuff. Gosh, I'll feel a lot easier when they get this place fixed up. Right now, you know this would be worse than Black Tom in the last war if anything went wrong this week. That stuff in the cars alone would blow the fire clear over to the oil cracking plants across the tracks. And you know what's on the other side of them.
Yes, said Wally. Of course, they got lots of guards and everything, but...
But is right, said the man. We need munitions in a hurry, all right, but they got stuff too concentrated around here. This isn't any place to monkey with trinitro anyway. It's too near other stuff. If this plant did go up, even with all the precautions they're taking, it'd set off a chain of... He looked narrowly at Wally Smith. Say, we're talking too damn much. Don't say anything like what we've been saying outside the plant. Wally nodded very soberly. The workman started to heft the sack, and then didn't. He said, Yeah, they're taking precautions, but one damn spy in here could practically lose the war for us. If he had luck, I mean, if it spread, there's enough stuff right near here to, well, damn near to swing the balance in the Pacific, kid.
And, said Wally, there'd be a lot of people killed, I guess.
Nuts to people. Maybe 1,000 people get killed. What does that matter? That many get killed on the Russian front every day. More. But Wally... Hell, I talk too much. He swung the sack of cement back onto his shoulder and went on into the building. Wally finished his lunch thoughtfully and wadded up the paper it had been wrapped in and put it in the fireproof metal trash can. He glanced at his wristwatch and saw there was 10 minutes left. He sat down again on the edge of the platform. He knew what he ought to do. Quit. Even if there was one chance in a million that... But there wasn't a chance, even in a million. Damn it, he told himself he'd been cured. He was okay, and they needed him here. His job was important, in a small way. But listen, just in case, how's about going back to that psychiatrist he'd used to go to? The guy was still in town. Tell him the whole story and take his advice. If he said to quit, then... And he could call him up now from the office phone and make an appointment for this evening. No, not the office phone, but there was a nickel phone in the hall. Did he have a loose nickel? Yes, he remembered now, he did. He stood up and reached into his change pocket, pulled out the change there. 4 pennies. And he looked at them curiously. How the deuce had he got those pennies? There'd been a nickel. He reached into his other pocket, and his hand froze there. His fingers had touched cardboard shaped like a folder of paper matches. Scarcely daring to breathe, he let his fingers explore the foreign object in his pocket. Unmistakably, it was a folder of safety matches, a full one, and there was another one below it. And didn't those matches sell 2 folders for a penny? The missing penny from his nickel that had turned into 4-cent change. But he hadn't put them there. He never bought or carried matches. He hadn't. Or had he? Because he remembered now the queer thing that had happened this morning on his way to work. That funny feeling when, with mild surprise, he'd found himself on the corner of Grant and Wheeler Streets, a block off his regular route to work, a block out of his way, and he didn't remember walking that block. Getting absent-minded, he told himself, daydreaming. But there were stores along that block, stores that sold matches. A man can daydream himself into walking a block out of his way, but can he make a purchase, one with fearful connotation like that, without knowing it? And if he could buy matches without conscious volition, couldn't he also use? Maybe even before he could get out of here. Quick, Wally, while you know what you're doing, while you can. He took the 2 folders of matches from his pocket and pushed them through the slide of the fireproof trash can. And then, walking rapidly, and with his face white and set, he went back into the building, down the long corridor to the shipping office, and went in. He said, "Mr. Davis, I quit." The bald-headed man at the desk looked up, mild surprise on his face. "Wally, what's wrong? Has something happened, or are you well?" Wally tried to straighten out his face and make it feel as though it looked natural. He said, I just quit, Mr. Davis. I can't explain." He turned to walk on out. "But, Wally, you can't. Lord, we're short-handed as it is, and you know your department, Wally. It'll take weeks to get a man broken in to take your place. You've got to give us notice to pull something like this, a week at the very least, so we can break in. No, I quit right now. I got to." "But hell, Wally, that's deserting. Man, you're needed here. This is just as important as the Baton Front. This factory is as important as the whole damn fleet in the Pacific. You know what we're doing here, and what are you quitting for?" I'm just quitting, that's all." The bald-headed man at the desk stood up, and his face wasn't mild any more. He was a little over 5 feet tall, to Wally's 6, but for the moment he seemed to tower over the younger man. He said, "You're going to tell me what's back of this, or I'm going to—" He was coming around the desk while he talked, and his fists were doubled at his sides. Wally took a step backward. He said, "Listen, Mr. Davis, you don't understand. I don't want to quit. I got—" "Hey, where's Darvith? Get Darvith right away!"
"He's over chewing the fat with Apollo. The Greeks trying to talk him out of this because Greece is on America's side and wants them to win. But Apollo and all the rest of 'em aren't strong enough anymore to buck—"
"Shut up! Hey, Darvith!"
"Yes?"
"This pyromaniac of yours, he's going to talk. They'll lock him up if he does, and he won't be able to—"
"Shut up! I see!"
"Hurry, you're going to lose—"
"Shut up, so I can concentrate. I got him." "Listen, Mr. Davis, I didn't mean it that way at all. I got such a splitting headache. I just couldn't think straight, and I didn't know what I was saying. I was just saying anything to get out of here so I could go—"
"Oh, that's different, Wally. But why quit? Just because you got a headache. Sure, leave now and go to your doctor, but come back, today or tomorrow or next week, whenever it's okay again. Man, you don't have to quit just to go home if you're sick."
"All right, Mr. Davis. Sorry I gave that impression. I wasn't thinking straight. I'll be back as soon as I can. Maybe even today."
"That's it, Wally. You've got him fooled now. Tell him you're going to see a doc, and that'll give you an excuse to go out for a while. That'll let you buy some more matches, because you couldn't get the ones back you put in the trash box, not without attracting attention. You're going out to get more matches, and you know what you're going to do with them, don't you, Wally? You're going to lose 1,000 lives and several $1 billion worth of materials and lots of valuable time off the armament program. But it'll be a beautiful fire, Wally. The whole sky will be red. Red as blood, Wally. Tell him. Look, Mr. Davis, I've had these headaches before. They're sharp and awful while they last, but they last only a few hours. Tell you what, I can come back at 5 and work 4 hours then to make up for this afternoon. That'll be all right." Why, sure, if you're feeling all right by then, and are sure it won't hurt you, we are behind, and every hour you can put in counts.
Thanks, Mr. Davis. I'm sure I can. So long.
Nice work getting out of that one, Darvith, and tonight will be better anyway.
Night is always better.
Boy, oh boy, I'm going to be around to watch. Remember Chicago, and Black Tom, and Rome.
This will top them.
But those Greeks, Hermes and Ulysses and that gang, won't they get together maybe and try to stop it? And some of the legends from other countries on that side might join in. You ready for trouble, Darvith?
Trouble? Phooey! Nobody believes in those mugs enough to give them any power. I could push 'em all off with my little finger. And look who'd help us if they did start trouble. Siegfried and Sugimoto and that gang.
And the Romans?
The Romans? No, they're not interested in this war. They don't like Mussolini much. No, there won't be trouble. One of my imps could handle the whole gang.
Swell. Save me a box seat, Darvith. Night was strange. At 7 o'clock, when he'd been working 2 hours, it began to get dark, and it seemed to Wally Smith that darkness itself was something alien. He knew with part of his mind that he was working just as he always worked. He knew that he talked and joked with the other men on the shift. Men he knew well because he'd often before worked several hours overtime and thus overlapped the evening shift. His body worked without his own volition. He picked up things that should be picked up and put them down where they should be put down, and he made out cards and file memos and bills of lading. It was as though his hands worked of themselves and his voice spoke of itself. There was another part of Wally Smith that must have been the real part. It seemed to stand back at a distance and watch his body work and listen to his voice speak. A Wally Smith that stood helpless on the edge of an abyss of horror, knowing now. The wall pushed through, knowing everything about Darvith. And knowing that at 9 o'clock, on his way out of the building, he would pass that corner room where he'd carefully planted the heap of rubbish. Highly inflammable rubbish, stuff that would catch fire from a single match and flare high, setting fire to the wall behind it before anyone would even know it was there. And behind that wall, there were only 2 things left to do. Turn the handle that shut off the sprinkler system, light one match. One yellow flaming match. Then the red hell of consuming fire. Holocaust. Fire they could never stop once it was started. Building after building turned to flame red. Body after body turned to charred black as men, killed or stunned by the explosions, cooked in a flaming hell. It was a strange mix-up, the mind of Wally Smith. Nightmare visions that seemed familiar because he'd seen them in dreams when he was a child. Fantastic beings that he'd never been able to describe or identify as a child. But now he knew, at least vaguely, who and what they were. Things out of myth and legend. Things that weren't. But that were, somehow, in that nightmare plane. He even heard them. Not their voices, but their thoughts expressed in no language, and names, sometimes, that were the same in any language. Over and over again, the name Darvith, and somehow it was something of fire named Darvith that was making him do what he was doing and going to do. He saw and heard and felt in loathing terror while his hands made out shipping tickets and his voice cracked casual jokes with the other men around him. And watched the clock. 9:50. Wally Smith yawned. Well, he said, guess I'll call it a night. So long, boys. He walked over to the clock, put his time card into the slot, and punched out. Put on his hat and coat, started down the hallway. Then he was out of sight of the others, and not yet in sight of the guard at the door, and his movements were suddenly stealthy. He walked like a panther as he turned in at the door of the deserted stockroom, the room where everything was ready. Here it comes. The match was in his hand was striking the match. The flame! As the first flame he had ever seen, dancing on the end of a match in his father's hand. while Wally's stubby little fingers, all those years ago, had reached out for the thing on the end of the stick. The thing that flared there, ever shape-changing, yellow, red, blue wonder, magic beauty. The flame. Wait until the stick has caught fire too. Wait until it's well ablaze, so stooping down won't blow it out. A flame's a tender thing at first. "No!" cried another part of his mind. "Don't, Wally, don't!" "But you can't stop now, Wally. You can't don't, because Darveth, the fire demon, is in the driver's seat. He's stronger than you are, Wally. He's stronger than any of the others in that nightmare world you're looking into. Yell for help, Wally. It won't do you any good. Yell to any of them. Yell to old Moloch. He won't listen to you. He's going to enjoy this too. Most of them are. Not all. Thor's standing to one side, not particularly happy about what's going to happen, because he's a fighting man, but he isn't big enough to tangle with Darveth. None of them is, over there. Fire's king, and all the fire elementals are dancing a dervish dance. Others watching. There's white-bearded Zeus, and someone with a head like a crocodile standing beside him, and Dagon riding Scylla, all the creatures men have conceived, and conceiving. But none of them will help you, Wally. You're on your own, and you're bending over now with the match, shielding it with your palm so it won't blow out in the draft from the open door. Silly, isn't it, Wally, that you're being driven to this by something that can't really be there, something that exists only because it's thought of? You're mad, Wally, mad! Or are you? Isn't thought as real a thing as anything? What are you but thought harnessed to a chunk of clay? What are they but thought unharnessed? Yell for help, Wally. There must be help somewhere. Yell, not with your throat and lips, because they aren't yours right now, but with your mind. Yell for help where it will do good, over there. Somebody stop Darveth. Somebody that would be on your side. Yes, that's it. Yell! How he got home afterward, and an hour later, Wally never quite remembered. Only that the sky was black with night and studded with stars, not a scarlet sky of Holocaust. He scarcely felt the burns on his thumb and forefinger where the match had burned down and burned out against his skin. His landlady was in a rocking chair on the cool porch. She said,
"Home so early, Wally?"
"Early?"
"Why, yes. Didn't you say this morning that you had a date with that girl of yours? I thought you ate downtown and went right to her house from the plant."
Wally, panic-stricken in remembering, was running to the telephone. A frantic moment, and then he heard her voice.
"Wally, what happened? I've been waiting since—" "Sorry, Dot. Had to work late and couldn't phone. Can I come around now? And will you marry me?" "Will I? What did you say, Wally?"
"Honey, it's all right now. Will you marry me?"
You come on over and I'll tell you, Wally. But what do you mean, it's all right now?"
I'll be right over and tell you." But reason reasserted itself in the 6 blocks he had to walk, and of course he didn't tell her what had happened. He'd thought up a story that would cover what he'd said, and one that she'd believe. Of such stuff are good husbands made, and Wally Smith was ready to make a good one if he got his chance. And he did.
"Papa."
"Hush, child."
"But why, Papa? And what are you doing under the bed?"
"Shh. Oh, all right, but talk softly. He's still around somewhere, I think."
"Who, Papa?"
"The new one. The one that... Grief, child, did you sleep all through the rumpus last night? The biggest fight here in 17 centuries.
"Gee, Papa, who licked who?"
"The new one. He kicked Darveth so far he hasn't got back yet. And then a bunch of Darveth's friends ganged up on him, and he knocked hell out of them. Now he's walking around out there and—"
"Looking for somebody else to beat up, Papa."
"Well, I don't know. He hasn't started a fight with anybody yet, except the ones that started after him, except Darveth. I guess he took on Darveth because this human being Darveth was working on must have called him."
"But why are you hiding, Papa?"
"Because, well, kid, I'm a fire elemental, of course, and he may think I'm a friend of Darveth's, and I'm not taking any chances till things quiet down. See, Golly, there must be a flock of people up there on this guy's side and believing in him to make him as strong as that. What he did to Dartmouth.
What's his name, Papa? And is he a myth or a legend or what?
Don't know, kid. I'm going to let somebody else ask him first.
I'm going to look out through the curtain, Papa. I'll keep my glow down to a glimmer.
Hey, come. Oh, all right, but be careful. Is he in sight?
Yes, I guess it's him. He doesn't look dangerous, but...
But don't take any chances, kid. I'm not even going near the window to look out. I'm brighter than you are, and he'd see me. Say, I didn't get much of a look last night in the dark. What does he look like by day?
Not dangerous looking, Papa. He's got a white goatee, and he's tall and thinnish, and he's got red and white striped pants stuffed into boots, and a stovepipe hat. It's blue and got white stars on it. Red, white, and blue. Does that mean anything, Papa?
From what happened last night, kid, it must. I'm staying under the bed until somebody else asks him what his name is.